Welcome to the Mismatch. I'm Chris Vernon, and joining me, he does every week from TheRinger.com, is Dave Jacoby. Jacoby!
Verno, so much has happened since we last spoke. So much has happened. I don't know where to start here. I really don't.
We've got to start with Nuggets Thunder because about a month ago, you on the show highlighted that these teams were going to be playing a back-to-back when we got to March. And you, at that point, highlighted the game saying, this will be the MVP Bowl. We are going to get to see SGA. We are going to get to see Nikola Jokic, these two teams going up against each other. And we know that there is going to be a debate on which of those two players is the most valuable player in the league. I don't know if we got any further down the road on said debate, considering SGA had the night of nights on night one and his team got the victory. And then last night, as we record this on Tuesday morning, Nikola Jokic's team got the victory and he was otherworldly in the game. And so the Nuggets beat the Thunder 140 to 127 in the second game of back-to-back. And man, oh man, when you think about this through the prism of a playoff series, they got to see each other once. They got to feel each other once. Now came back for game two. It seems as if this could be absolutely epic if we did ever get to see it in a 7-game series.
Well, we'll put a pin in the MVP conversation. We'll have Coach Malone. We'll hear from him in a second. But I think that the main takeaway from these two games for me wasn't about the MVP race as much it was about these two teams and how they stack up. And much like a playoff series, when you see game one, you overreact to that and say there's no chance that Denver could possibly win. And then you see game two and then you say, oh, they've made the adjustments and they totally figured it out. But if you really want to break game two down, which was Monday night's game, it was as simple as this. The Nuggets could not miss shots. And I was texting you during the game because you were at the Grizzlies game, which was weird. Good win. But there was a run where Pickett hit a three, Westbrook hit a three, and Peyton Watson hit a three. And I don't think it was consecutive possessions, but it was probably that was 3 out of 5 possessions. And when that happened, I was like, well, this team is not losing tonight. This was really about everyone else hitting threes and Jokic just orchestrating and everything just clicked into place. And I really think another thing it showed was just how much the Thunder rely on J-Dub's shot creation, because the Nuggets were just we're going to double SGA on the touch. Once J-Dub went down, it was we're going to double him on the touch and let someone else beat us. And Lou Dort did his best to be that someone else, but it just wasn't enough. And it was a really interesting game that I hope is a preview of something that we'll see in the conference finals or the playoffs.
So one of the things I texted you last night and I said, all right, I got to go back and watch this because you're texting me as it's going on that the Nuggets cannot miss.
Can't miss.
What's crazy is as I'm watching this unfold this morning, Jacoby, I'm writing down in my notes with 7 minutes left so I know the outcome. I know the final score of this game before I'm ready to watch it, right? With 7 minutes left in the third quarter, the Nuggets had 76 points.
With 7? No.
With 7 minutes left.
So they scored 64 points?
Yes.
God.
They had
doesn't even make sense.
76 points. 76 points. With 7 minutes left in the third quarter. Then as I'm watching it unfold, at one point, the announcer says, well, I'm not. I think the color commentator says, "How many have they missed in the second half?" And the announcer says, "They're now 11 from 15 for three, 73%. 11 for 15. I mean, that's the rule here, right? To your point, you're not beating anybody that's shooting 73% from three. It's impossible. It's one thing. It's one thing to be able to generate open threes. It's another thing to knock down 73% of them at one point. It was just so extreme. But This is how, and the shame of it all is you're left after watching those two games going, man, I'd love to see game 3.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like
Right?
I called this the MVP Cup or the MVP Bowl or whatever, thinking that it would provide some sort of clarity, but it was just like a net neutral. It really was. SGA was amazing on Sunday. Jokic was amazing last night. Again, it was also it was more like the Thunder were great on Sunday and the Nuggets were great on Monday. And I walk away from this thinking about both the teams and the individual stars that it's a very even matchup. That's how I walked away from it. It's a very even matchup.
Do you think it meant anything towards the MVP?
Well, I think that Coach Malone had some really sort of enlightening sound. Now, Jokic himself said, I'm playing the best basketball of my life. If he wins it, he deserves it. But he's sort of like, it was sort of the first time you hear Jokic sort of like express his desire to win the MVP. But Coach Malone broke it down very succinctly right here.
You know, this whole MVP thing is really going to pick up. And you understand that. That's a part of it. Obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a great player. And if he wins his first MVP, you know, he's deserving of that. My thing is this, you know, if you didn't know that Nikola won 3 MVPs, and I put player A and player B on paper, and you had no idea that the guy who's averaging a triple-double, the guy who's top 3 in the 3 major statistical categories, things that no one's ever done, he wins the MVP 10 times out of 10. And if you don't think so, I think you guys are all full of shit.
I love it. But I think he is right. I think if Nikola Jokic had never won an MVP before, this is his year to win his first. However, he has already won 3. So as it goes, we want to see a new person with the trophy. We want to hear a new speech. We want to create a new narrative. We want to build a new thing. And I think that SGA will win, but I think that Nikola Jokic is the most valuable player.
But can that narrative take hold? I think that is a very persuasive argument, you know. And I was listening to Russillo on with Bill on the pod they did earlier this week, and one of the things he said is, in the end, I am left with this feeling that the best player in the world is Nikola Jokic. That's how I feel. I feel like he is the best player in the world. And so when it comes down to the debate, and you sit there and you go, who is the best player? Not. And again, this is always the debate, right? Is it best player? Is it best season? Is it, you know, I line them all up at the park and I've got to win one game? Who do I take? Is it, you know, the guy whose team has the best record? Is it, you know, because you can put up a myriad of accomplishments for both of them, right? I mean, if you want to line up here, if you wanted to make the argument for SGA, it is super persuasive. And if you want to make the argument for Nikola Jokic, it is super persuasive. And the interesting thing about this year is it's only 2 guys. You know, We've had it split. A couple of years ago, I remember doing this show saying, look, if you voted for Embiid or you voted for Giannis or you voted for Jokic, I'm not gonna be mad at you either way, right? It's eye of the beholder. And I do think that this is one of those. And though I thought earlier in the season that SGA was going to totally run away with this because we always like new blood, the narrative would take hold. Best player, best team. That has generally been the history of the award over the course of NBA history. That being said, Jokic has made that an impossibility. I mean, he's too freakish.
Well, I mean, we were discussing this when the Nuggets were the 5 seed, and that was a different conversation. But now they're the 2 seed, and they split the season series 2-2 with the Thunder. It's like, well, who is the best team? And I also think we're going to see SGA win it, but I think that Jokic has had the best season and he's the best player. I think that Jokic has a better season, but because of just the fact that the history of this award is not always the best player, it's whose turn is it now? Who are we inviting into that exclusive club? Being an all-star is great. Being an all-NBA is better. Being an MVP is better than all of that. And I think of players like Derrick Rose, Like those great players that had that great season that are now part of that club. And it's like a banner in the rafters you can never take off. Derrick Rose will be at his like granddaughter's high school graduation, and he'll have to give a speech, and he'll be introduced as NBA MVP Derrick Rose. And I think that sort of putting that brand, that stamp on SGA feels appropriate at this moment in his career. But if in a vacuum, Jokic is a better basketball player, I don't think very many people would argue otherwise.
That being said, don't we always look back in history and say, okay, that guy got it, but, right? And sometimes we do it with LeBron. Obviously, look, we're both old now. We still think about Karl Malone winning the MVP over Michael Jordan. And you look back and you go, right.
And this feels like it could be one of those years. It feels like when we look back at like the total body of work that Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander put on the floor during their NBA careers, I don't think it will be very comparable in terms of who was more effective during the run of their careers. And I also think that you can't really say, like you can in many LeBron seasons, and you can make a case in that Malone season, that yeah, he's not the best player, but he had the best season. I don't think you can say that about SGA. You can't.
Well, and we did it with Jokic a few years ago, and then he reminded everybody and went and won the title.
Yep.
Right? And then we were all sitting there going, maybe he is the best guy. You know what I mean?
And it doesn't. One thing I think SGA is going to win, so we can talk about this forever. But like, I really do think that it's SGA's to lose. But I do think it's interesting from a branding and like a personal standpoint that Jokic is being vocal about his desire to win it. And his feeling of being deserving of winning it. And in a very Jokic, humble way, he sort of expressed that he wants to win. And like last time, that slight could be motivation during the playoffs for him just to absolutely go nuclear. And he has that potential.
One other point on last night's game. There was no watching it, but then there are times where the guy looks so much better than he does other times. That looked like playoff Murray. Like that was the Jamal Murray that runs that high pick and roll with Nikola Jokic that strikes fear into opponents in the playoffs. And, a miserable Olympics. And then the first couple of months of this season were a dud. Yeah. But man, oh man, just in a vacuum, you watch that last night and it's like, oh God. Like is this big game guy? Is this just he's going to show up when it matters most?
It's like a Derrick Henry thing where it's like he sort of like treats the season as like a ramp up and he starts to peak around this March, April time. And this isn't the first year that this has happened with Murray either. Right. Like this is why he hasn't been an All-Star, because he waits until after the All-Star break to really turn it on. And before we move on, I also want to just give someone else in the Nuggets a shout, which is Christian Brown. And like what his evolution from like athletic, bouncy, fast white guy to like actual contributor, shooter, transition god has been really interesting to watch. And it is one of those things when the Nuggets famously lost Bruce Brown and then KCP, and they had these ideas of Christian Brown stepping into that spot. And I was somewhat skeptical at the time earlier in the season, but now I am not at all. He's a guy. He's a two-end contributor, and he's been playing really well in the last month.
Yeah, last night was interesting. One last thing is if anybody goes back to the very beginning of the game, I had this flashback. Years ago, Tayshaun Prince told me this story, which I've referred to before, about how at the beginning of the game, Larry Brown had this theory of just throw the ball to Ben Wallace, first possession of the game, and he could do whatever he wants. Literally, if he wants to throw it in the stands, he can throw it in the stands. If he wants to take a 15-footer, he can take a 15-footer, whatever. But if you get Ben Wallace, if you give him the ball, you let him touch the ball, you let him do whatever he wants, now you're going to get all that other stuff. You're going to get the rebounding, you're going to get the defense, you're going to get everything, right? You've gotten him engaged early in the game, and now he's a part of this. And he goes on, he tells this story. He goes, if you ever go back and watch, I think it's game 5 against the Lakers. He's like, first play of the game, off the tip, we throw it to Ben Wallace. And Ben Wallace knocks down this 18-footer. The entire roof comes off the place, and we all looked at each other like, oh, yeah, this is it. If you go back, the reason I'm mentioning this is because if you go back, that game starts where the ball swings around, and they throw it to Russell Westbrook, and he pulls up for an 18-footer, and he buries it, the first shot of the game. And I was like, oh, my God, is this a Ben Wallace thing?
It felt like it.
Maybe we should have known the way it was going to play out, because it's like, really? First shot of the game, like, you're thinking about all the adjustments that have been made and everything like that. And it's like swing, Russell Westbrook, and he just pulls up and takes this long two, but he buries it. And I was like, oh, maybe that was an omen for how that thing was going to play out last night.
Before we move on, one thing I want to say about this Nuggets game and just them moving forward, something to keep an eye on, especially when we start looking at like second and third option scorers, is I feel like they need to water the plant that is Michael Porter Jr. a little bit more than they do. I think that it's so much Jokic and so much Murray. That's sort of like you said, like the ball has energy. Like you want to touch it. And I'm watching Porter Jr. last night in key possessions, and even like in the fourth quarter when the game was already in hand, he kind of runs to the corner and stands there a lot. For someone that has his ability, like I think that for the Nuggets to really make a championship contention run, they're going to need his contributions. And to get his contributions to be what you want, you have to water that plant, get him more touches, run plays for him, get him more involved. And I think that'd be really helpful for the Nuggets.
So last night, the game that I was at was Memphis versus Phoenix. And you show up to the arena, and there is like Memphis has absolutely no big guys available for this game. Brandon Clark is out. Santi Aldama is out. Jaren Jackson Jr. is out. And Zach Edey is out. Like all four of those guys are out for the game. And, the Suns have got their guys, and they've caught some breaks here, especially with the Mavs going into dismal mode. I mean, they should be ashamed. I texted you this as I was watching this game. I'm like, how can they not win these games? Right? When they've got, I know Beal was out, but they still got Durant and Booker. Durant misses a game winner at the buzzer. But I think the big story, obviously, from last night's game is this continuation that after Memphis had this 4-game losing streak, they've now won 3 in a row, not over great competition, but Ja Morant has looked like a different human, especially in fourth quarters. He has gotten stronger as the game goes on, multiple double-digit fourth quarters recently, and they're running a lot more high screens and letting it – I talked to you about how they've got to figure out – they installed this new offense this year, and that the trick has been what is best for Ja versus what is best for the group. And it's almost like they installed an offense that is Ja-proof, right? It enabled them to still be good in the absence of. And the numbers have been very good. And yet, it's clearly not the best type of offense to get the most out of him. And what you have seen recently is them running a lot more of the Ja Morant offense. And setting those high screens, letting him turn a corner. You have to make a decision on whether he's going to throw a lob or he's going to kick out for a 3. And so they've installed a lot of stuff that they used to run, and I think he has reaped the benefits of it. The other thing is, if you saw the ESPN game that they played against Dallas over the weekend, he slipped up and he said after the game, he said, wow, you looked a lot better in the second half, because he was dismal in the first half. And then he was like, yeah, I'm probably not supposed to say this on TV, but I had some help. Like, okay. Those hey, if he took that cortisone shot in the shoulder, I tell you this, he has looked like a different cat ever since whatever happened.
Well, I want you to explain a little bit more for our audience, because you watch every single minute of every single Grizzlies games, but I'm sure a lot of people listening don't, is they were sort of one of the lowest high screen and roll teams in the league by design.
Yeah.
They were absolutely the lowest by design, and that has changed the last couple of weeks. So what do you think Jenkins' strategy was to establish that to begin with, and why change it now, and what has it done for Ja?
I think there was a level of frustration that was starting to boil with Morant, because everybody's going, what's wrong with Ja Morant? What's wrong with Ja Morant? And
Myself
part of
included.
it is, Right. Yeah, and part of it was, there's a lot of different things that go into it. Part of it is wanting to have a revenge season that got kind of ripped away by injury. And so all those like All-Star, All-NBA, all that stuff, like getting your place back in the league, that's kind of ripped away from you because you get injured and you have to sit out so long. Then you have this new offense and you have to come back in and meld into it. Then there is, right, like this all five guys in unison playing, sharing the ball. And like he is a ball dominant, right? Great player that also one of the things that made it much harder on him is like, I'll give you a for instance, right? Like, so say you're playing against the Knicks, right? Okay. So you're playing against the Knicks and they bring out and like typically your point guard gets to face the the Trey Youngs of the world and the Jalen Brunsons of the world, whatever. So let's just say you're playing against the Knicks. Well, now I've got Bridges on me.
Yep.
And Mikal Bridges is guarding me the whole game. Every time I get the ball, Mikal Bridges is guarding me. In the absence of getting switches, I am just dealing with life with Mikal Bridges. Like, that is basketball, right? Like, being able to get those guys. And instead, what you say is, okay, Mikal Bridges is kind of taking this out of the mix. Now, what I do is going to be harder to pull off, but also now these other guys have more desirable matchups. And so the frustration ends up building, right? Where it's like, yo, like the whole gig of this is get me switched on to Brunson, get me switched on to Trey Young, get me switched on to this big that has to come out all the way from the basket. And so you're seeing a lot more of those recently. And obviously, sometimes, I think them reinstalling this basketball can be rather simple. If you can set a reasonable screen up top, he's turning the corner. These are now a decision that has to be made. Am I taking the roll guy? Something's happening. He's either going all the way to the basket, he's kicking out for an open three because the corner guy pinched, or he's throwing up something to the big that is rolling to the basket. And so I think just adding more of that into the mix has had a tremendous benefit for him. And he's also beyond any of the basketball stuff, because it's not like he's been Mr. Efficient recently, but he's been much more aggressive, and also like all that swagger that everybody loved and the rest of the team feeds off of, that has come back in a way that it just, the frustration, he was just morose in many cases throughout the year, but you've started to see a lot of the, okay, I'm that guy. Here's what I do. Even last night after the game, as he's walking off, they asked him about the 10-point, fourth quarters that he's recently had. And he's like, that's what I do. It's like, oh, okay. Like, what? I know, but we didn't see, like, you know what I mean? Like, he hasn't been that guy. And like, you're seeing that confidence build. You're seeing that old Ja Morant start to come back. And man, oh man, would that be just in time?
Well, they need the new Triple J to come back, because without him, they're not going very far. But we'll move on from the Grizzlies, and I do want to talk about a game. You brought up sort of like the give me a pick, let's get a switch, and let's attack the matchup that we want to attack. And there was no game that exemplified that than a game that feels like it was 3 weeks ago, but it was just Saturday night, and that was between the Lakers and the Celtics. And it just felt like the Celtics' plan was to get Luka in front of the ball carrier, and it worked. And the Lakers' plan was to get Al Horford in front of the ball carrier, and it did not work. I was so impressed by Luka getting Al Horford in front of him and saying, no more picks. Everybody get out of the way. I'm going to cook Al Horford, and Al Horford just not letting it happen. It was really, really impressive from the Celtics-Lakers game.
I mean, you saw that stat that I think it was Tim Bontemps that put up about how, like, that was the most that has happened since the tracking. It's like the whole, okay, we've decided we're going to try to get Al Horford isolated on these guys over and over. It's happened like 23 times or something. And 2 horrible results. Al Horford.
Like 0.39 points per isolation or something.
I mean, at his age, to be able to hold up like he did, it was just It was otherworldly. That guy is a flat winner. He just is. Like that's like the kind of guys that you just have to have on your team. It's like, all right, if this is what you want to do, you think you're picking on me? Go ahead. I'm going to shut you down. And he's like down in this defensive stance and
He
ready
knows
to
it.
go no matter the matchup. It's unbelievable. That there's no way that you should not have the advantage when you get the switch onto Al Horford. And yet he had the advantage in that game. That was so impressive. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and it does. Is it me or is Luka like always a little hurt? Is he always a little
Yeah.
hurt? Like
Yeah.
always. I just feel like he's never 100%. And I don't know if he's like the toughest or the softest basketball player I've ever seen or somewhere in the middle, but he's always hurt. Always.
Wait. Am I talking to Jacoby or Nico Harrison?
I had to bring this up because last time we did a pod, I mentioned that Nico Harrison was getting booed at a hockey game. It's been upgraded. He got booed at medieval times in Dallas. At medieval times during the horse show. I've never been to medieval times in my life. I've always wanted to go. It's a bucket list thing. I look forward to going. I want to experience that. But the idea that they're chanting "Fire Nico" at a medieval times show restaurant is just wild to me. Absolutely wild. Wild.
Wait, is that the thing where they like dress up like knights?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. You've never been either?
It's like
I've never been.
You know what's crazy is when I was recently in Arizona, they have one like that, and I looked it up and I thought, wow, this would be super fun for the kids. The menu looked horrendous.
Oh,
they,
yeah.
Everyone's
like, oh, the turkey legs. Be like, oh, turkey legs. Turkey legs are the absolute worst. I don't care if you're in Disney World. I don't care if you're at a state fair. I don't care where you are. That is not a hot take. Turkey drumsticks are terrible, terrible, terrible meat. I've never enjoyed one. I think no one's ever enjoyed one. I think people fake it. They just think it looks cool to carry around a turkey drumstick and feel like a Viking or whatever. But no. But I want to go to medieval times. And we're losing Hooters. I don't want medieval times to go without me experiencing it at least once.
So Nico got booed at medieval times. They should
They're
have had
firing.
like
The horses are doing a horse show. It's knights jousting and having sword fights, and for some reason they're chanting "Fire Nico."
They should have had like whoever was like the Joaquin Phoenix character, like do like the big
the thumbs,
the thumbs down thing. You take him out in the middle. Unbelievable.
But I think the biggest thing to come out of Celtics Lakers was LeBron getting hurt. Obviously,
sure.
They said 1 to 2 weeks. Doesn't seem that bad. Obviously, it's a little concerning because of his previous groin injury, but there is a little bit of silver lining to this where it's like, all right, let's let Luka run the offense for a little bit and get LeBron some rest, get ready for the home stretch. Doesn't seem to be like a very serious injury that'll jeopardize him for the playoffs.
And then they couldn't beat the Nets.
Couldn't beat the Nets. And I couldn't even watch it.
Gotham
Sports, man. I refuse to pay. When I go on the app, there's a big lock sign next to the Nets games. But shout out to NBA Crunch Time. I got to see the end via Crunch Time.
But here's what I was saying. This has been an ongoing thought of the mismatch for many, many years. As I have expressed, I've been around one NBA team for over 20 years, and it is without question every single year the ones that freak me out: groin, calf, hamstring. Those are the three. These soft tissue things, and they impact the playoffs every single year. So I know that it's supposed to be okay. I have just seen those end up being much worse than you thought they were at first, or taking a lot longer than you thought they were going to take, or a guy just never being able to be himself, or a guy, I've seen this one too, a guy come back and then immediately re-injure it, right?
Yeah.
Because these soft tissue injuries, those are the ones, for every fan out there, if you're a fan of a team, like those are the ones that to me always scare me the worst, right? I know how other one of the, in many cases, these injuries have, timelines on them, right? And you can, if somebody busts their ankle, which happens virtually every other night, You know they're going to be able to stick that thing in ice. You know they're going to be able to do some rehab, and you know they're going to be able to get back on the court. The sometimes super rolling timeline of these soft tissue injuries are the things that always worry me a great deal. And so that's the only reason I would have cause for pause on the LeBron thing, is because I just never want to hear hamstring, groin, or calf.
No,
And,
I mean,
and there's varying degrees to those, as there are with any injury. I just hate those injuries.
it's bad news, but when you watch the game and watch his reaction to the injury, it felt like
Right.
one of those, if this was the playoffs, I would finish the game.
Right.
I'm not debilitated. I don't need to, get treatment, go to the back, get MRIs. I think it was just a little bit of a tweak, which I think will ultimately be fine. But you cannot lose games to the Nets if you're the Lakers. I don't care who's hurt, who's not hurt, who you have, Rui or Hayes or whatever. Like, you got to beat the Nets, man. You got to beat the Nets in that one.
And beyond LeBron, this is something we're going to keep track of as we teeter towards these last 15, 16 games of the season, is we know that health is going to every year, health ends up dictating who is standing there at the end, right? And in many cases, who is even standing there by the time you get to the conference finals, as we saw last year with Indiana getting an opportunity to be there, and your Knicks becoming the walking wounded as the playoffs went on. There's a bunch of them to keep an eye on. Obviously, the Lakers have LeBron. They also have Rui. They also have Jackson Hayes. I told you the Grizzlies didn't have Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., bunch of guys. It doesn't seem like any of those are particularly serious injuries. The Van Fleet thing, didn't he get hurt in January? I mean, this is a
did
hell
he come
of
back? He's another one of those that came back and then left again.
hell of an ankle injury. And obviously they've they lost Thompson, who's going to be out for a couple of weeks, who is a massive contributor for them. Jalen Brunson, your guy, the very end of that game last week, lands on a foot. Ankle injury. It's going to keep him out for a couple of weeks. And then you have Kuminga and Podzinski. They're supposed to be able to come back into the fold for the Warriors. The Clippers have lost Norm Powell.
But wasn't Kuminga supposed to come back 2 weeks ago?
I know, right?
I thought Kuminga would be back by now. I didn't think it was going to be like this.
I think everybody did. And so, as we know, there's varying degrees of these ankle injuries, because obviously for Van Vliet and Kuminga's sake, this has been a rough go. And then all of these teams are dealing with something, and it's who can get to this finish line known as the playoffs beginning with their team intact, because we're now, as we get to this last quarter of the season, we're seeing a bunch of guys going down. It feels like every night there's some other injury that could be very impactful towards not only the standings, but also playoff basketball. Because you think about, look, this stuff is dictated by what happens in the standings. If the Lakers look like they did against the Nets last night and have this super tough go without LeBron, now all of a sudden you could be looking up, and if you're Oklahoma City, you're seeing them in the second round because they've dropped to 4, right? If the Clippers keep falling back, and then, and they're able to get Norm Powell back by the time, the playoffs come around, now they are a much better team than what their seeding is. And so it's odd. Some of these teams that are losing their players now that might have a rough go, and record-wise, it's going to dictate greatly what ends up happening in the playoffs, possibly simply because, they can't worry about getting these regular season wins, and in many cases, they're veteran-laden teams, but they may fall back in the standings, and then that changes everything in terms of outlook for playoff basketball.
There's something interesting happening, and I'm glad you mentioned this section of the Western Conference, that's sort of 3 through 7 in the Western Conference, because let's just stay with the injuries conversation we're happening. Lakers are without LeBron and Rui and Hayes. Memphis is without everyone who's over 6'8" in the entire roster. Houston's without Thompson and Van Vliet, as you mentioned. And then you've got Golden State, who are without Pods, but
and Kuminga.
And Kuminga, who are supposed to be back soon. It does feel like, we always said when they got Butler, we're like, Golden State's going to make a run at the 6th seed. Well, they're in the 6th seed right now.
Yep.
But I think when you look at sort of the way things are going and who's available and who's not and how hot the Warriors are, they've won, 12, 14, 5 in a row. the Warriors might creep up into that 4 spot, 5 spot. I could see that happening for sure, which would change the dynamics of the first round pretty dramatically.
Well, and obviously, if you're Oklahoma City, the last thing you want, in my opinion, is for the Lakers and the Warriors, the Warriors moving up and the Lakers moving down, which we both just accepted are like very real possibilities given the circumstances of the last 2 weeks. Because right now, if you're Oklahoma City, it's an absolute dream. You're playing a rat team in the first round, more than likely. And because of whoever wins the play-in. And then you would be catching the winner of, more than likely, Memphis and Houston with the way this is playing out. Well, imagine if you were catching
Memphis and Houston, though?
But I'm saying, imagine if the Lakers fall back and the Warriors play 4 games better than their peers the rest of the way, and now you're catching the winner of Lakers-Warriors, or one of those two. That is a much more daunting task than it would be to play some of the teams that have less playoff experience.
The Thunder path could end up being Timberwolves, Lakers, Nuggets, Celtics.
Yeah,
or Cavs, or whoever it is out of the East. That's a tough run. That doesn't feel like a 1 seed run to go up against Anthony Edwards and now Gobert and whatever Randall's doing. Fine. But then you're going to face Luka and LeBron in the second round, and then the best player on the planet and a hot Jamal Murray in the conference finals. Like, that's tough. Like, you work your entire 82-game regular season to have the honor and the privilege to have home court advantage and to have the 1 seed in the most favorable matchups. It just doesn't feel like you're getting them. And I hate to say this to you, Verno, but the softest part of the Western Conference playoffs are the Rockets and the Grizzlies. That's sort of like the soft middle of the playoffs.
Of course, that's who you would want to face.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, look, I'm the one that comes on here every day and tells you vet teams win. Like, that has been the history of the league, and usually that's the trial by fire that the young teams have to go through, right? Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, I mean, you think about it, the last 2 times Memphis was in the playoffs, they ended up winning the first round series, and then they played against Golden State, and that was the trial by fire, and they end up losing that hard-fought series. And then the next time around, they get the 2 seed. Well, they run into the worst possible situation they could run into, which was in the play-in game, Anthony Edwards has literally the worst game ever, and they blow it against the Lakers. Minnesota does. So then the Lakers got the 7 seed. And so and then they mashed in the Grizzlies in 6 games. Well, if Memphis would have drawn Minnesota instead of the Lakers, it's probably a different world. So that's what I'm saying. This stuff all becomes matchup dependent. And yes, I am well aware. If you're somebody like Oklahoma City, I am praying. Look, as someone who roots for Memphis, I would take the deal right now to play Houston and then Oklahoma City, rather than having to play those vet-laden teams. You know what I mean? You don't want any part of those teams.
And that's why I think that we focus on the playoffs so much. But these last 17 games of the regular season are just as important because they're going to determine who you play in the playoffs.
Now, the hard part is how far up, as you mentioned, the Warriors can get. As it stands right now in those Western Conference playoffs, they do, there's not so many
It's going to be tough
games.
to get above Memphis.
There's so many games left, right? So right now, Golden State has played 65 games, right?
Yep.
Okay, 65. So they got 17 games left.
And they're 3 behind the Rockets.
Yeah. So they would have to play 3 games better than the Rockets the rest of the way. And they would have to play 4 games better, really 5 games better than the Grizzlies the rest of the way. Or the Lakers, for that matter, because the Grizzlies and the Lakers are tied at 12 back from the number 1 seed. So, I mean, that's you've got to put together a really good record. I mean, you have to win so many of those last 17 games, and then the other team has to go basically 500.
But we're also talking about a team that has won 12 of 14.
Understood.
So it's not
Understood.
impossible. So we'll see.
It's not
It's something to keep an eye on. Something to keep an eye on. I think the Western Conference sort of like bottom half is much stronger than the Eastern Conference bottom half. And that goes without saying.
I
One of the best parts about the tourney is when an underdog takes down a powerhouse. And right now, those upsets can get even better because all this week on FanDuel, if your underdog bet wins, you'll land even more winnings with a profit boost. This is your chance to ride with the long shots, the scrappy teams, the ones that refuse to go quietly. And while a lot of this attention is being put on the tournament in college basketball, I have my eye on some NBA underdogs. This Wednesday night, we've got a few of them that got my eye on. One, I'm just going to say this because technically they are an underdog, but the Oklahoma City Thunder are plus 4.5 in Boston against the Celtics. I would always ride with the Thunder, especially if they are underdogs. But that's not a real underdog, as I said, because they are one of the best teams in the NBA and have a high chance of winning it all later. But one team that has no chance of winning it all, no chance of making the playoffs. However, I think they could pull off an upset this Wednesday, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans with Zion, when he plays, playing well, against the Clippers. The Clippers will be on the road, and I have a hunch, a little hunchy feeling that the New Orleans Pelicans pull off the upset and are your underdog, and FanDuel will give you a profit boost if your underdog wins. If you've been waiting to join FanDuel, there is no better time. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you'll get paid instantly. Just visit FanDuel.com/mismatch to download America's #1 sportsbook today and back your dog of the day with a profit boost. Because after all, anything can happen in March. Remember, you must be 21 and over and present in select states and 18 and over and present in D.C. Opt-in is required. Wager of at least plus 100 odds is required. Bonus issued as a non-withdrawable profit boost token. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com.
All right, let's get to our random questions of the week.
All right, you start.
All right. So, if you could have one NBA player you want to be on a stranded island with in order to survive, you would choose?
Okay. I thought about this way more than I should have. So I'm on a stranded island, castaway style, with one NBA player. I don't know how we got there, but let's just imagine we got there. Okay.
It was a terrible plane wreck, and you guys were the only two survivors.
Yeah. Did we eat any people in the process?
No.
We didn't eat any people.
No, this person obviously. Look, you're going to need a real alpha male because this person.
Listen, I thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Now, initially, I said I want someone country. That's where I went first. I was like, I need someone country. If we're going to be stuck on like a deserted desert island, I need someone who knows how to start a fire, skin an animal, catch a fish. And I was like, I need someone country. I need someone strong. And I also am going to spend a lot of time with this person, like a lot of time with this person. So I need a good attitude. So I started with Steph Curry, and I was like, he might just be too smiley and happy for like, he seems like a peacetime president and not a wartime president. And then originally I said to myself, I need someone strong, someone fun to be around, and someone country with survival skills. And then it dawned on me, and I had the perfect answer for this. A gentleman you're very familiar with, who goes by the name Stephen Funaki Peya He Ofa Ki Loa Adams. Steven Adams, I challenge anyone to come up with a better answer than Steven Adams. Because Steven Adams, first of all, great hang, great attitude, great, just like a good vibes all day, every day, because this is going to be a marathon. It's going to be the two of us hungry, stuck on a deserted island. So it's going to, we need to keep the morale up. And I feel like Steven Adams would do that. Also, from New Zealand, I'm sure he can catch us some fish. He's literally from an island, and he has 17 older brothers and sister. He's the strongest person, not just in the league, maybe on the planet, probably top 100. And he's just the absolute perfect person to be stuck on a deserted island with. I challenge anyone listening to this pod to tweet at me and Chris Vernon and come up with a better answer than Stephen Funaki Paella He Ofaki Loa Adams.
I don't even think I am so proud of you, and I don't even think that they're like, unlike the MVP, this is no debate. Whoever is number 2, it's so far away. This guy never wears shoes. He's also the kind of guy that, like, let's just say a python ran up on you. Like, he would just grab it.
Yes. No.
He would just grab it. He would literally just grab the snake and strangle it.
Yes.
If you needed food, he'd be able to get you food.
Oh, no, here's the scenario I love. I'm trying to climb a palm tree to get a coconut, and I have no upper body strength. So he sees me fail and fail again. Yep. He walks over to the coconut tree and just like picks it up out of the ground, roots and all, puts it on the ground in front of me and says, "Go grab the coconuts. They're on the ground now, David." That's what he would do with a smile on his face. I love Steven Adams for that answer. I'm so proud of myself for that. Should we just end?
I got to be honest with you. I thought I was going to. I set that up because I figured you were going to take somebody else. Like I thought you were going to go the brains over brawn possibly.
No.
Very proud of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any animal that comes out of the jungle to attack us, I stand behind Steven Adams, and Steven Adams carries the day. Any animal.
I agree.
Okay. What team are you looking at right now that would not?
Hey, hold on. I got to mention one other guy. Just another guy that I actually came in contact with, Jonas Valanciunas.
Oh.
Same kind of dude. Like, bro, he hunts wild boar.
Ooh, I need a hunter. Yeah,
like,
I do need a hunter.
Hey, I'm talking with a knife.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I did. You know what? I was watching the game last night.
It's a different breed, bro. Guys like that, they're a different breed.
Oh, yeah. I was watching the game last night, and they literally said, outside of Steven Adams, I can't think of someone in the NBA stronger than Valanciunas. That's literally what they said. They brought up the two of them in the same sentence last night.
Do you know one time he told me the most incredible story on my show about it? And this is one of the times I've done a favor for somebody where years ago it was like about him hunting wild boar and all this stuff. And they were like, his representatives were like, hey, can we take that out? Like, we don't want to deal with the PETA people and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, all right. But I was like, but that story is crazy. I'm like, this guy like goes and like hunts boar with his hands. You got to be a maniac. All right. Anyways, go back.
I feel like you should be allowed to hunt things without using bullets. I feel like that's like no matter what it is. I mean, again, PETA people,
like Eastern
leave me alone.
Guys,
Yeah.
Come on, give them a break.
All right, mine's is pretty much down the middle. This is my only sort of like down the middle basketball question. What team are you looking at that you think will be the most likely to pull off a first round upset? So what team will be on the road in a game 1 of the playoffs and not the obvious like 4-5 matchup? Like what team in sort of like the 6, 7, 8 seed, or maybe in the 9 or 10 right now in the Western Eastern Conference, do you think is most likely to pull off a first round upset?
Okay, so we need to talk this through a little bit, because are you saying they will be on the road at the beginning of the playoffs, or are you saying that they will be the underdog in the series? Because I do think
that's fair to say. Underdog. We'll go underdog.
Because we could there's a scenario where the Warriors are not the underdog, right? Like that if you want to, when it comes time to bet them on FanDuel, they are actually
like a Grizzlies Warriors series would probably favor the Warriors.
Correct. Yeah. But I would say, look, the answer by a wide margin is the Warriors. Right now, again, if we're doing this today, they're more than likely going to be on the road for their playoff series. All of them. They're more than likely at this point. Now, they could keep on winning, but the answer is they are by far the most dangerous of the seeds 5 and below the rest of the way. Because are there any of those, Indiana, Detroit, Atlanta, Orlando, none of those scare you. Like none of you would be. Indiana is the only one.
Indiana. You know what? I was doing a little prep work for this like second and third scorer thing.
If Indiana beat Milwaukee, it wouldn't be the craziest
But Indiana's like third option is like Mathurin. You know what I mean? Who's fine, but it's not like scary. And also Detroit is a tricky one with that too, because you're kind of like Cunningham, and you're like Beasley and Durant. You know what I mean? Like it is an interesting exercise that we will do, which is why those teams don't scare me. But I would say of those teams, the scariest are probably the Magic. Probably the Magic. But they're playing terribly right now.
Ugh, no.
I know.
They're cashed out.
You know what? It's the Warriors, but here's my thing, man. Like when I went to that stupid Warriors game, it's just, again, I get that Pods was out and I get that Kuminga's out and we'll see what we get from them, but it's like Santos and like Pajimski and Quentin Post and Kevon Looney. I just think the drop off after Draymond on that team is huge. And when you watch someone like the Thunder, they're like their 10th rotation player is like better than everybody that's fourth and down for the Warriors.
And the other one is just because of, Jeff Van Gundy and Ty Lue being able to cook up something that just makes the other team wildly uncomfortable. If they were able to get to the playoffs, I know they've been on this recent swoon, but if the Clippers were able to get to the playoffs with Harden, Powell, Leonard, all those guys, Zubats, all those guys available, like they've got a bunch of wings. They've got guys that can make shots. And also I do have a great respect for their coaching staff and their ability to make life hell for their opponent. They're one to watch that could at least be dangerous.
Yes. And I think a lot of these, like, quote unquote, upsets will end up going like this. You split the first two on the road, and then you win game 3 at home. And then everyone like us is talking about how the series is over. And they end up losing in 6 or 7. That's usually how it plays out. You split the first two on the road. You win game 3 at home. Everybody overreacts. And then you end up losing in 6 or 7. But that'll be a fun ride to go on, which we do every single year. Here's you're next.
Okay. Next question. What do you think about LeBron James confronting Stephen A. Smith in front of everyone?
As a policy, you have been doing this a long time. And I tend to steer away generally from like covering the coverage, from like getting into like media said this or Charles Barkley said this about Kendrick Perkins and Kendrick Perkins said this. Like I try to stay away from that sort of stuff. But this one I found interesting because I always say this, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And Stephen A., obviously a former colleague of mine, his number's not in my phone. Like we're not like great friends, but he's, never been negative towards me. Great dude. Obviously good at his job, but I think LeBron got everything that he wanted out of this, and I'll explain why. I don't think it's a coincidence that the news came out that Stephen A. signed a $100 million deal with ESPN, and then LeBron is confronting him like 24 hours later. And I also think that LeBron James knew that in between the third and fourth quarter, I want to say is when this happened, LeBron James knows that there are 20,000 people with little camera phones in their pockets. And that if he walks over and talks to Stephen A. and he does not start with a handshake and doesn't end with a handshake, and he has a stern face on, that he knows that it's going to play out the way it did. And I think that this is not a coincidence that this is a topic of conversation. I think LeBron intended for this to be the result, and it worked exactly as he wanted it to. Let's not forget how and when it happened. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's not that he confronted Stephen A. about some of the words that he said about him as a father or Bronny as a basketball player. It's that he did it while he's in uniform, at home, in Los Angeles, on television, in the spotlight, at his house. It's basically his living room at this point, walking over to Stephen A. Smith and giving him some very stern words that anyone who didn't even hear the conversation, which we did not, can take away from it that it was not comfortable for Stephen A. Smith. And I think that LeBron wanted this and he got this. And I think that this is also way more about LeBron feeling disrespected as a parent or LeBron feeling that Stephen A. disrespected Bronny. I think this is the culmination of years and years and years of players like LeBron and others not loving the way that Stephen A. approaches his job. And I think that this was a little bit more of excuse isn't the right word, but a reason to come talk to Stephen A. in this manner. This was more or less the excuse for him to address Stephen A. in this manner, but it wasn't necessarily about something that Stephen A. said about Bronny. That was my take on the whole thing.
Because it wasn't a basketball thing. I think what set LeBron off is the whole, I'm talking to you as a father. All right, so now you're not talking to me. You established. You're not talking to me about being a basketball player. You're not talking to me about basketball. You're not talking to me about my son being a basketball player. You're talking to me about my parenting on national TV. And so, right, you know what I'm saying? I'm not talking to you as like if I talk to you like today and I said, Jacoby, I'm not talking to you as a sports talk host or a podcast host. I'm talking about you as a father. And it'd be like, okay, dude, like the reaction you're going to get, right? Like, bro, now you're talking to me about what I am as a father. You are criticizing me as a father on national TV. I got that. I understand getting mad about it.
I mean, I get it. So I think I move a little different than a lot of people. Like the whole, like, don't bring my kids into this, or kids are sacred and off limit, like in a rap beef or something. I'm like, yeah, criticize me as a father. I'm not a great father. I have a lot of growing to do. I'm like, right now I'm like a C+. You know what I mean? So like, sure, go ahead. Criticize my parenting. I don't care. It doesn't change my life or my kid's life. Go ahead. Say I'm a bad dad. I'm working on it. Like, I don't know. I'm just not that sensitive about that stuff. Like, feel free to criticize my parenting. I'm not the best.
I think it would bother you if Stephen A. Smith was on ESPN saying it, though. You would.
I would be more surprised than bothered. I'd be like, how did this get in the D block?
He knows my name?
Yeah, exactly.
He always just called me fella.
If that.
What we got next?
Next. Okay. Here's something that I found very interesting. Because remember, I'm tracking this pretty closely. This Kevin Durant-Suns relationship. The Suns were reportedly, shopping may not be the right word, but having some conversations about potentially trading him at the deadline. And then he comes on to Draymond Green and Baron Davis's podcast and says that he wants to finish his commitment of this year with the Suns. And then there are reports from our guy Shams who says that the Suns would work with Kevin Durant in the offseason to get him to a contender. And now there's Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic who's connected. And this is from his article, quote, sources inform the Republic the most ideal return on a Durant trade is regaining 3 first-round picks and a young player as part of a multi-team deal tied to getting under the second apron. Interesting. So they potentially had conversations about trading him. He said he wants to finish this season. There are reports that they would work with him to trade him this offseason. And now we've got a price. Like a price is being put out there into the ether. Not just this guy's for sale. Like, you know when you go to the jewelry store and you see all the jewels, but you don't see any price tags? Like, that's the way Kevin Durant was before. But now there's a big old price tag next to him about what the Suns want in return. So this says to me that he is gone after this season. And my question for you is, where do you think he's most likely to end up?
Well, you told me a couple weeks ago that he was going to be a Rocket.
He's going to be a Rocket.
I mean, that's what you said. I mean, look, obviously, if they said they are willing to work with him, that list gets very small, right? Because it's like, okay, if you're working with him, he ain't going to a team that he doesn't think he can win with.
Like the Wizards. The Wizards are one of the teams that's sort of like part of this. And I've said this to you before. I hate when we want to put players in their hometown teams. Sure, he grew up in the DMV. Doesn't mean he wants to play for the Wizards. Doesn't mean he wants to be Jordan Poole and Sarr's teammate.
Well, and I told you that during the trade deadline, Memphis put a huge offer on the table for Durant, and it just did not happen. And so, is that something that can be revisited
Interesting. After a first round exit?
when it comes time? I don't know. That Houston team obviously is loaded up. What about a return to OKC?
So
What if something happens with them and it falls short and they say, hey, we'll stack together a couple of these awesome young players and we've got more draft picks than God, so we can set you up and then we get this swan song return for him to Oklahoma City. I mean, I think you could be looking at Oklahoma City. I think you could be looking at Memphis. I think you could be looking at because again, this is the last go round. This is the last go round, right, for him.
Yes.
Right? Wherever he goes next is probably the end. Okay?
I will say of those teams, I've been thinking about this a lot. Of those teams, it feels like OKC is too much of a close to finished product to add someone like Durant, although they have the draft assets and the young players. I just feel like they're going to win like 60-something games this year. Like, do you look at that and be like, we need to make some dramatic changes? And I would that's why the Rockets scream to me. My question for you about Memphis is, who is the young player? Like, who's that like future all-star that's wearing a Grizzlies uniform right now that you could package with a bunch of picks? Wells?
G.G. Jackson?
Like, that's not, Kevin Durant. Like, I'm looking at the Rockets young players and the Thunder young players, and I'm saying we got some potential future all-stars that you could send my direction in exchange for a future Hall of Famer like Durant. It'll be interesting to see, but I don't think he's on the Suns next year.
Yeah, I don't either. All right, you mentioned in the last episode about having a pregnant wife and that you got another kid on the way, right? What is the process for naming kids in the Jacoby household?
I'm fucked, Chris Verno. So we're going to have this kid hopefully on the 27th of March. I might not make the show on the 28th.
2 weeks, huh?
Scheduled situation. We've had a couple C-sections before to kind of go back to that route. And so it's a scheduled thing. And we have 3 other kids. Quincy, great name. Loved it. Great job by us.
All right, how'd that come about?
We had a book at the time that was like rock star names, and we loved Q as like a nickname. So it really came down to like Quinn, Quentin, or Quincy. And Quincy Jones, we're just like Quincy. It just hit. She was like 4 months pregnant. We've already decided it's over, right? And then we have twins. My wife's name is Joey. Everybody calls her Joey, but her real name is Joie. If you speak French, it's like joie de vivre, like joy in French. So if you want to like really get in her good side, call her Joie. And her name is French. Her middle name is Dominique, so it's like a little Francophile thing. She's Jamaican. I don't know how this French stuff got involved. So we have Margot and Chloe, which are like 2 French names. And we did pretty good with that. But right now, we got nothing. Nothing is sticking. Nothing is sticking whatsoever. We have to have like a real head-to-head meeting about naming this child, because like the family names are awful. There's like Denise, Esther, Ruth, Victoria, Dorothy, Patricia, like Clara. Like these people are clearly born in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So we're screwed. I don't have a name. I might just name her Chris.
It's
might
so
as well just
funny.
name her Chris.
Hey, look, like when you go to now, I never knew either of my grandfathers, but when we were doing the family thing too, my grandfather's names were Horace and Stancil.
Stancil's such a good name. Stancil, Stancil. That's an awesome name.
Sell.
Oh, I love it. Oh,
Yeah.
Stancil? Oh, that's awesome. All right, naming my daughter Stancil. There we go. Thank you for clearing this up for me. Oh, one quick name. So we're firing text back and forth trying to see what sticks to the wall. And I'm watching some show. I think my kids are watching it. And there's a character named Dalen. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I was like, let me send it to Joey, right? I send it to Joey. And she writes back. She's like, so you want to name our daughter Dalen, which is basically a combination of your and Uncle Jalen's names. And I was like, no!
Oh, wow.
I was like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. I was like, we cannot do that. We can absolutely not do that. I've got a final question for you. I'll keep you guys updated what the name is. Final questions here. Jesse has the audio ready to play.
Oh, hey, can I? Hey, real quick
Oh.
before you play the audio.
Oh yeah, tell me your story.
No. I was just gonna say, how about Cam Spencer Jacoby? Could you do that?
But see, my wife doesn't like short first names, so it'd have to be like Cameron Spencer Jacoby. But that could work.
Okay.
That could work.
This is a chance. All right, what we got?
Okay. So, people love certain athletes that are in their life, and they take it, far. I used to pray to like a poster of Larry Bird when I was a kid before basketball games. And this is a question I have for you is the audio that you're about to hear, like an R&B song about an athlete, is this a touching tribute to a future Hall of Fame NBA player, or is it kind of creepy and doing too much? Jesse, let Chris hear it. R&B song, LeBron James.
That's not real.
That's real.
That's like somebody AI'd or something, right?
No,
Like,
that is real. It's been on the internet for like a week now, and it's starting to pick up steam.
Is the name of it LeBron?
I think so. I think it's called LeBron James.
Why is it? It sounds like Trey Songz or something.
LeBron James. No, it's like that's 90s. That's like Color Me Bad, like Jodeci vibes. It's like Casey
Drew Hill.
Drew Hill. Yeah.
No, that's creepy, bro. That's creepy.
A lot.
That's super creepy. That's super creepy. Come on. You
like,
ask me, is that a nice tribute or creepy? I land on creepy. What? Who is singing that? Who is bopping that in your car?
But no, who's like tells their best friend, like, oh, what'd you do today? It's like, I recorded a song, I'm trying to work on some new music. It's like, oh, what's it about? Oh, it's LeBron James. What's the chorus? It goes like this: LeBron
Okay,
James.
I'm gonna give you. All right, I'm just gonna end with this question to you. Then I'm gonna flip it back on you. Where would it be acceptable to listen to that song?
Never. I can't think of a scenario.
Where could you be? Like, because you could say, right, in my car, AirPods, like
there's only one scenario. There's only one scenario when it's okay. When you're listening to the Mismatch every Tuesday and Friday on the Ringer Network,
that's the only thing.
and we bring it to you. That's the only. That if you're listening to Mismatch in your car and it comes on and you got the windows down, you listen to Mismatch on 10, and you stop at the stoplight and someone looks over at you and you're sitting there leaned back with one hand on the wheel, like LeBron James. God, my singing voice is excellent.
DJ Jesse Lopez. Thank you to our executive producer, Jesse Lopez, as always. And Jacoby, I'll talk to you later this week.
Must be 21 and over and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 and over and present in D.C. Got a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.